Hey everybody, it's Justin from Built, and if you've watched any of my small shop series, you'll know that I gutted this entire back corner of my shop and I've been remaking it. The small shop series is all about trying to make your tools as compact but as functionally organized as possible. So in case whether you're in a two-car garage like I am or you're in a small shed shop like many of my viewers are, this option will work in both scenarios. We're always running out of space for our tools, and so being able to effectively organize them is definitely a plus. So I'm not going to reinvent the wheel today, unfortunately. I'm going to be doing a power tool, handheld holder, battery storage, that type of stuff. There's a lot of videos out there about it, but what I'm trying to bring to the table in this video is we're going to talk about placement, we're going to talk about modularity, and I'll also have all of these files for free for you. So if you have a CNC machine, you'll be able to download the files for free. Hit cut and cut everything out. If you don't have a CNC machine, I will have photos up at the end of the video that show all of my dimensions for all my cut list and everything, and so you can make this yourself pretty easy. So let's get into it today on Built and do organization. So I'm going to show you a couple different ways that we could implement all this and a couple different holders. All of these holders are uploaded for free on that easel file, so you'll be able to download these and run them through a CNC machine, or if you don't have a CNC machine, you can actually just look at the file and I'll show you the dimensions so you can cut this out yourself. Right? So I have two different sizes of hooks. Hooks are good for larger items, oddly shaped items like this. I have the J style, J for Justin. You have to use multiples of these, so you'll typically see these one after another in a row. The tool hangs in the gap between each. And then we have a diagonal holder. So this is more for like something like this, which if I tried to put it in a hook or a J, it would go crooked because it is lopsided. So in this situation, we just put it in here, and I left enough room for my hand to grab it at the bottom. Same thing with the circular saw one right here. After I built this, I'm actually not a huge fan of this one, but it's in the file for you if this is your bag. It's big. Circular saws take up a lot of space, so I don't think I'm going to implement the circular saw in my setup. My first design idea would be to mount this example piece in the middle of the ceiling above my workspace, whatever that might be for you, as long as it's reachable. Now, I made this small workpiece because I honestly haven't even 100% decided the way I'm going to do this project yet. So as I'm going through this and showing you the different ways, I'm moving this around and it helps me decide what I'm going to do. So if you ever get stuck on a project, make a little dummy and move it, and it'll hopefully help you figure out the right answer. So if you do this and you're not having it against the back wall, this does allow for additional storage behind it on the back wall. Now, not everything will work back there because you have this stuff in front of you that's impeding your view and impeding your reach. But something long and tall like this, I can easily unhook and hook back in again, and it would work. Something like levels that are small, things that are low profile and stuff. This definitely wouldn't be for everybody. I like not having anything in my way because I have a decent amount of wall space for my tools. So I would rather have an unimpeded grab. However, not everybody has that space, and many of you have commented that you're working out of like a shed shop that's very, very small. So for you, you will sacrifice a teeny bit of convenience for additional storage space, and so that is what this would be for you. So this is definitely for somebody with a very tight space, which goes along with our small shop storage mantra. For me, I need to try and get batteries here. So I made a really crude scrap dummy shelf example just so that I could say, okay, I need to be able to double stack 2 batteries. I made the back so tall because I might have to put the cleat up at the cleat rung above it. And will I, be able to grab it with these tools here? Yes. So it is low enough for that. Maybe I could even raise it a little bit. Yes. So I could probably get to like halfway up my cleat. I'd still be able to grab from here. And so then the question is, if I move down the line and I put it at halfway up on the cleat, can I get all of my tools out without it impeding, my function? And I would say yes until I get to here, because halfway up this cleat is literally touching this stuff. So if I did a battery shelf, I guess I would be limited to go from here over, and then I'd have other space for things over there. That's not bad. I could probably make that work, but let's play around with some other options. Okay, so next we would be moving this from the middle to the back. And if you're at the back, you might as well go ahead and just mount it to the back wall. So in order to change this to mount it to the back wall, instead of it being a J, I'm changing it over to an L shape and then putting the bolts directly into the back. These bolts would be on T-track that would be horizontal on a backer plate over here. That way it gives us this horizontal motion. And so, of course, it fits well that way as well. I might raise this up a little bit because we don't need all this headroom up there, which would enable us to put more stuff below. Now, you might say, Justin, you have French cleats. Why don't you just make French cleat versions of this and don't even bother with the T-track? Well, there's two very important reasons why. And I'll use these two triangles as examples. So this version, when the T-tracks are there and it is bolted down, it inhibits these two J's or L's from moving right to left. That's what we want. And so, you know, when I'm putting this on again and again and again, it doesn't move. But when I go to put it on this, there's nothing, see how it moves like this? There's nothing keeping it from not moving right to left. Right? And so that's going to happen regularly. Now, you would say, well, this one's really, really skinny. The same thing's happening with this one. Very little movement is going to cause it to move. And I can't make a bigger backer because then I wouldn't be able to get them close together in order to do this. So that's really the big reason. And so I would say that the T-track is still the way to go, even if you're putting it on a wall, even if the wall has French cleats. Now, my batteries. Take my battery shelf analogy here, and yes, I can do this, and that works, and I'm about the halfway mark on here, which I said would be okay for me. If I move this up, I could definitely get two batteries in there without coming into contact with the tool, so that would be a viable option. Another option would be to use these, and these are battery mounts. So you can buy these for any brand on Amazon, and you can screw it to the ceiling and then just click it in, and then you hit the button to pull it back out again. So that's awesome. Now for you, most people, you might have 5 to 15 batteries in your collection. I have 50 and growing because as I rate and review more tools, I have to get batteries to run them. So I'm going to be really inundated with batteries soon. But for me to buy enough of these, it would be like $200. So that's a lot of money. One option then would be for me to make a shelf that is coming down from here that I could slide the batteries on, take them off. But as you might already be noticing, it casts a huge shadow. And once the batteries are in there and it has a back and stuff, it would do this and would completely shade the back of my cabinet. That might matter to you, it might not, so you know, just pointing it out. Now if I do these battery mounts, this would be a lot slimmer, so a slimmer piece of wood that is more of an acceptable amount of shadow that's up there. That'd be okay. So just keep that in mind if you were going to do a shelf, if you have under cabinet lighting, of course. Not everybody does. So for a third way to do this, instead of having the batteries on the bottom, we can put the batteries up on the top by putting a shelf above where the tools are located. And then we'll mount the T-track underneath here for these to slide, and so the tools will go under. Now, a negative to this over the other styles is because we've dropped the tools down, they are now closer to my other tools down here. When it was a battery on a little shelf, notice how far in it is, and so you're really not impacting anything in this grabbing range. But because this extends out, and so I have these things extended out here, and yeah, I can push them in a little bit, it depends on the tool. Now it's more in the way. So there is that. Also, this is one of my shorter tools. If I went to a longer tool like this, you know, I'm really close now. So there's that. Also, if I have this going all the way down, it definitely is not going to work directly over this. Even the smaller tools would be being hit by these tools as I try to take them out, so that's not going to work. So I think what I'm going to do is a hybrid. I'm going to go with this style. I like the just ease of being able to grab all the batteries right here. All my chargers are right here, so I want the batteries very in your face. So I like this version. I'm going to take it, I think, to right here. And then I'm going to use Model 2, which was the wall-mounted ones. And then that way, these really tall tools, since they won't have a battery shelf up above them, will be able to go much higher, and I'll have plenty of room so that I don't have tools hitting each other as they're being held up there. All right, so the very first thing that we should do in building this project is actually not build the main structure, but we need to at least build one tool holder. So this is one of the J tool holders. I put it through my CNC machine. It comes in two parts. The parts are the J and the flat piece that the tools sit on, and literally they just intersect just like that, and it's done. Congratulations. You can either glue it or put a screw on there. I like just putting a screw in here, putting them together. That way, if there's a tool situation where I need to cut this or put a different piece on, I'm not wasting both pieces. So I like the screw way. Once you have this, now we're going to go ahead and put the two holes for the T-bolts in. And this is why we're doing this first. When we put the T-bolts in, we need to make a jig. Now in the file that I uploaded, there is a jig with precise holes for where to drill. If you're going to do this yourself, no problem, if you're not going to follow along with a file. You need to use a jig of some sort because you're going to be doing this a ton of times. You need to make sure that those holes are in the same place every single time. And then this is also used to lay out where your T-track goes on the main board. So a jig for this would basically just be some pieces of wood that sandwich where the holes are going to go really tight. So I mean, this thing's not falling off. So we know every single time I put this on, it's going in the same spot. And then we need to put two holes for where I should insert my drill bit to drill this out. That way, we know the holes are in the same spot every single time. If one of these holes is off, it's not going to line up with the T-track and it's not going to work. So I would definitely use a template, a jig of some sort, whether it be the one that I provide or just one where you're sandwiching scraps on all 5 sides and then putting the screw holes in. Now once we have this, I'm able to literally just put this down on my main board and mark it at one end, mark it at the other end, draw a line, and that's where my T-track goes. So it just makes everything simpler. Okay, so let's go ahead and mark our board now that it's cut. What I'm gonna do is I'm taking my jig and I've labeled one of them front. On the file, it has a big F there. Front is gonna be flush to one side. If you make it flush with this piece of wood, then it's exactly where the front of the T sits, kind of just like that. It'll have a gap in the back. And we need that gap because of how we're going to install it. So just making a circle there and a circle at the back. Okay, so we have our 2 circles. I'm gonna go ahead and do this at the other end. All right, so now that I have multiple marks made, I'm actually going to line up the dots with the edge of the T-track in the center of the dot, and I'm going to make a line. Okay, that way there's at least a visible line when I have it here. I'm then going to take my T-track, and there's all these pre-drilled holes in here. I'm gonna make sure that that line, and specifically the dot over at this end, are in the middle of those holes, which means it is in the center of the T-track. There we go. And I'm just going to double check. Very good. So I'm going to hold it in place now very firmly, and I'm going to mark on both sides of the T-track its entire length. That way I know the exact size of the pocket I need to make the dado for this T-track. So I have both of these marked. I'm gonna go ahead and just test it with our one holder that we made. Why not, you know? So what I did was I laid 2 tracks down. I'm pressing down hard on it so it doesn't move. And then I'm gonna get these guys in here, hopefully. The one thing about T-bolts is if they're facing the wrong way, it's a pain in the butt. All right, we got it. Cool. So measuring many times is good. I like it. So now I can take the T-track off and go ahead and run dados on just this one, not the other piece. So first we're going to set up the blade to cut for the dado for the T-track. And when you're setting this up, what you want to do, put the T-track directly next to the blade, bring the blade down to where it's literally exactly the same. And then I want you to just bring the blade just a hair back up again. And there's a reason for that. Why won't my blade go back up? There we go. So we're just a hair taller than the T-track. You want the T-track to be slightly recessed under the wood. You don't want any possibility of it protruding, and preferably just a hair below. That way, when the bolt tightens, it's exerting a lot of pressure on the wood next to it. So very important safety tip real quick before we do this action. We're going to be doing a dado cut, which a dado cut is a blind cut. You cannot see what is going on because the blade is not penetrating through the board. And so anytime you're doing a blind cut, there is an added level of danger and risk when using the table saw, because as you slide this forward, you have an idea of where the blade is, but you don't know, you don't have visual confirmation of where that blade is. And so definitely do not use your fingers. And I also would recommend not using a push stick during this operation. A push stick grabs the back of the wood and pushes forward. If you are grabbing in the wrong spot back there, you're going to strike this blade, and it's either going to go flying, or it could be like one of our awesome members who commented on my last time I talked about table saw safety, and he let me know that his push stick got caught by the blade and sucked in and took off 2 of his fingers. That's horrible. So a push stick is not the right tool to be using for this. A push item that grabs the top. Now it could be this grip ripper. I'm not specifically saying this company, but you know, anything that's grabbing the top, keeping your hands away from everything and pushing it is way safer, because you have nothing at the back where the blade's going to be coming out at, and the blade does not penetrate the top, so it's not going to hurt this whatsoever. So grab something that you can use for this. Also, since we can't use a blade guard on here because it's a dado cut, you know, we're going to have a little bit less sawdust collection. You know, I can't drop my sawdust collector on top down, so make sure you're wearing a respirator, eye protection, ear protection when you're doing these cuts. Okay, so we got our first run of dados. This is a 24-inch board that I'm doing for my second section as well, so I did both of them at the same time. But, you know, I did a whole bunch of cuts, and so this is one of those fun, rewarding things where you can just put your finger in and rip out all this paper-thin cuts of wood. Very satisfying. And then we're going to want to take a chisel and lightly scrape inside here to make sure that we are perfectly flat for our T-track when it is inset. I goofed. I always show you when I mess up, so I now have to run to the store and get a new board to just make this over again. This wasn't a huge amount of work, so it's okay. And I used cheap wood because I know I'm going to end up ripping this apart again and it's going in the garbage at some point. So why make it out of mahogany if I'm going to junk it? So the issue at hand. I intended to make the back part of the shelf have a dado, or at least a rabbet. That would give additional glue surface and support to this plate, because not only is this plate, when I flip it over, as it should be, it's going to have batteries on top of it pushing down. It's going to have tools underneath it pulling down. So there's a lot of downward force on this. And so if I just put another board right here and glued it and tacked it, that's not strong at all. Yes, I could add some triangles on here for added rigidity and support, but then that eats up storage space for my batteries. So what I had intended to do is put it in on a dado, and that makes it very sturdy. Well, what I didn't account for was when I did it, I was like, oh, I got enough space. But when you put your actual holder on, it extends to both sides of this board. So this board is 5.5 inches by measurement. I'm going to go to the store so I can at least have a 6-inch board that I attach this to by measurement, not by store-bought numbers. I will update everything in the file so you don't make the same mistake, but just understand, like, it's very important that you just don't put another board here and tack it. There's going to be too much weight on it. We really need to support it well by using a dado. All right, I'm back from the store. So the old one that I had, I'm going to put it to the side because it still is perfectly cut for my T-Tracks, so perhaps I can repurpose it for something else. I went to the store and I bought an 8-inch wide board. So now I ran the dados the exact same way, and I have a big fat piece down at the bottom. I'm going to choose to trim this skinnier. I really only want to enlarge this board by about 1/2 inch from the previous one. So in your particular one, you're going to want to be at about 6 inches on your board where the T-Track is. Then what I'm going to do is run the dado on the backer board right now. I'm going to do that 3/4 inch up. That way it has a decent amount of material below it. And I'm going to run it 1/4 inch deep because I don't want to run it too deep or else it becomes too thin and it can snap off under pressure. So we want it to be a secure hold. So 1/4 inch deep. I trimmed down this board and let's go ahead and dry fit it. So it's facing me because I have it laying on its back right now. And what I did was I laid out all my batteries because that's the thing I'm going to be putting on here. If you're putting something else on, it might be a good idea when you dry fit to lay everything out. And the reason why I did that was I need to put in some supports on the top. Just running this dado here and gluing it and even screwing it is not going to be enough to hold all this weight. You're going to have to add some supports that hold it in several other places to the backer. So I made these triangles. I'll have the dimensions in the file at the end. And so if you have a small normal sized one, you know, more normal size than what I'm making, because mine's around 5 feet, you can get away with just ones at the ends. Now I made these so it sat on top, not as an end cap. If you do an end cap, it's going to block the T-Track, and then you're not going to be able to slide your bolts on and on easy. Now, since I made a really long one, I needed to put one in the middle just for some added support. I didn't like how long of a run it was. And if I just had measured it with a tape measure, my middle mark is right here. And so that would have ended up right in the middle of that battery. And so that's why I laid it out first. And I'm going to offset it just so slightly, but that way everything fits really nice. So I'm going to go ahead and sand everything down now, and then we'll look at doing the T-Tracks. I have sanded, I have put 2 coats of shellac on, so now it's time to assemble. I've put the T-Tracks in, and what I'm using to secure them is either a number 8 or a number 6 screw that is 3/8 inch long. I wanted to go with 1/2 inch, but when I took my calipers to this, it was going to protrude a little. So these are really, really small screws. So what you need to do on your tool is take it down to its lowest setting. You do not want to over tighten these. All it's going to do is just rip out the threading inside the wood fibers. So you want to go slow, and as soon as it makes contact, you want to stop. That's it. If you go too hard, it's just going to rip out, and it's not going to have any holding power. Now, even though this is a small screw, it will hold for quite a bit. If you ever do have failure, like I said before, you can choose to use a 2-part epoxy and it will hold everything. Or you could choose to put a thicker board and then you can use a longer screw, of course, with more holding power. While I have this out, this is a very interesting tool. I have a whole bunch of impact drivers that I was given for some reviews, and I'm spending a month using them on my actual projects before I give the reviews so that I can give you real honest opinions on how I felt that they used. They worked. And this one's interesting. I want to just show one thing. It's called the Freak, the Bosch Freak, and it's an impact driver. But it also takes sockets. without an adapter. It's just built in, so you get both of those tools for one. So cool little neat thing. Look out for my review on that. Now, we do not have enough T-track to make it all the way to the end, so I'm going to have to cut a piece. And since I'm also doing this other 2-foot one, what I will end up doing is using the excess from this one to fill the small spaces on the other one. So when I put it into position, I'm making a pencil mark right on it, and it shows up really good on this black one. And then I'm going to take it to either the bandsaw, the miter saw, or jigsaw. I'm going to go with jigsaw just because it's really easy to switch blades. And whenever I cut metal on any of those other ones, I want to use a metal blade, and I don't feel like switching it out. So let's use this one. So I made all the cuts that I needed to, and whenever you cut aluminum or most metals, there are burrs on here. It is very, very sharp. These burrs are just this little piece of metal, and they will cut you. So make sure that you hit it with a fine file. Do it in the same spot that you were just cutting the T-tracks, because there's lots of aluminum shavings on here. They will cut feet, they will cut hands, everything. So after you're done with metal, you always need to vacuum right after. Now, when you're doing the filing, really small movements, nothing crazy. You'll be surprised at how much you can take off without very much effort. And I always just kind of hit the corners too, just a little bit. And then I gently move my fingers around here, making sure that I'm not going to cut myself. All right, we're safe. So let's do that to all of those. Then we need to vacuum and clean up. All right, the holder's up. You can either mount it with French cleats if that's what you have, or you could straight up just screw this to the wall by putting screws in the back of the shelf at the top. Now, my batteries are fitting good. I'm very happy about that. The big next thing is that you have to make a ton of holders. So take stock of all the different tools that you're going to be putting up here and figure out how many of these holders you need. It took me probably 10 hours of CNC work to make a ton of holders to hold everything. So unfortunately, it will take a little bit of time. Now, since I have mine finished, what I'm doing is I'm starting at this end. So I've screwed this one down tight, and I've just slid a whole bunch of them on here loose. And I'm going to start by putting my first tool here. And so then what I can do is just slide it over, get it into a nice spot where I think I like it, and then tighten it down. Once you tighten both the front and the back, take a look, do it a couple times. Awesome, so that one's there. We'll move on to the next one. Slide it down, rinse, wash, repeat. So we're all finished. I think we did a pretty good job at putting a lot of my smaller handheld power tools up on the wall. I got a little over half of my batteries up here. I have another space where I keep them, so pretty good. I do think this is a little big, and I'm going to move that somewhere else after this video and probably put some other type of tool there. But you know, we all have our ways we like to do things, right? I do think that this is a phenomenal solution for somebody who maybe isn't doing French cleat. You know, lots of woodworkers, we do French cleat, but some people, that's not your bag. This gives you modularity. So as your tools change, as you have different tools that you want to put up here, you can make different holders and you can move it around in the same way that we make different holders and move it around with French cleat stuff. So that is a pretty cool option. You can do it in any of the different ways that I was showing before. I wanted to say thank you. During the filming of this, I hit my 10,000th subscriber. I started the channel 3 months and 3 days ago, kind of on a whim. And I never, ever imagined that I would get to this point in this amount of time. So thank you very much, everybody. I really appreciate it, and hopefully I can keep bringing you content that you like. As always, stay safe in the shop. I will see you in the next video.